He wasn't just sitting, he was waiting. Day after day, beneath the cracked roof of a forgotten bus stop in Bend, Oregon, a German shepherd sat unmoving, like a statue carved from loyalty and loss. Rain swept sideways across the broken asphalt. Snow piled around his paws. Still he stayed. Still he stared, no tag, no collar. Just eyes fixed on a stretch of road that rarely brought anything but wind and ghosts. At first, people didn't notice him. He blended into the scenery, another shape among shadows, too still to be alarming, too sad to disturb. Some thought he was stray, others assumed he'd wander off eventually, the way animals do when hunger overtakes hope. But he didn't. He sat, poised as if expecting someone to return from around the curve in the road, not looking for food, not seeking shelter, just waiting. The way someone waits for a promise to be kept. Passers-by offered him scraps, a jacket once, a kind word. None were accepted. He didn't growl, didn't run, but he didn't move either, as if every fiber of his being was tethered to the idea that someone someday would come back. That kind of stillness. It wasn't survival, it was devotion. And in that devotion, there was pain. Not loud, not violent, but deep. A quiet ache carved into his ribs, visible beneath soaked fur, paws raw from pacing, eyes glassy not from age or illness, but from repetition, from watching the same road deliver nothing, over and over. This isn't just a story about a lost dog. It's about faith with nowhere left to go. It's about a grief so loyal it stayed rooted in place, even when the world moved on. And it's about a man who couldn't ignore it. Jack Thompson wasn't the kind of person who stopped for anything. His days were long, quiet, routine, spent guarding empty lots and avoiding people. But on a cold, gray afternoon, something pulled his gaze to the side of Highway 20, to that weather-beaten bus stop, and to the shape that shouldn't have been. There. At first, he thought it was a statue. Then the wind tugged at the dog's fur. Jack slowed, pulled over, stepped into the cold. He spoke gently. Offered food. Got nothing in return but silence and a stare so fixed it felt like trespassing just to look into it. Still something stuck. Later, back in the warmth of his truck, Jack glanced in the rearview mirror. And that's when he saw it. Not a bark, not a movement. Tears. Sliding down the shepherd's face, slow and steady, like the rain had started falling from the inside out. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. Because that wasn't just a dog. That was someone's memory waiting to be remembered. Jack Thompson wasn't in the mood for detours. He had just finished another graveyard shift at the storage lot. 8 hours of fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and silence so thick it had started echoing in his skull. All he wanted now was a hot cup, a quiet room, and a chair that didn't squeak every time he shifted his weight. But as he drove west down Highway 20, something pulled at the edge of his vision. Something wrong in a way that didn't register immediately. A shape. Too still. Too intentional. It was only when the wind tugged at the fur that Jack understood. Not a statue, a dog. Soaked to the bone, a German shepherd sat hunched at the edge of a shuttered Greyhound stop. He faced the road like a sentry guarding the memory of a fallen comrade. His frame looked lean, too lean. His posture, unnaturally still, but not relaxed. No shiver, no tremble, just focus. Jack slowed, pulled his truck over with a hiss of tires, on wet pavement, and stepped out. The air was sharp and damp, biting through the holes in his old hoodie. He approached carefully, hands low, voice softer than he remembered it could be. "Hey there, buddy." The dog didn't flinch. Blink didn't even shift his gaze from the horizon. Jack crouched a few feet away. The shepherd's eyes weren't vacant. They were alive, intense, but trapped. Like they were stuck on a loop, watching the same moment replay again and again. Behind them, a plastic bag skittered across the sidewalk, then caught in the wind, and spun into the gutter. The dog didn't react. Jack had grown up around loyal dogs. He'd seen what devotion looked like. But this wasn't loyalty. This was desperation. This was heartbreak turned into habit. The dog's ribs pressed against skin and fur matted from the rain. His paws were raw and pink at the edges, curled beneath him like he was bracing against an earthquake no one else could feel. Jack stepped back. He didn't want to scare him. He understood that kind of stillness, the kind that wasn't peace but protection, the kind that builds around grief like armor. He returned to his truck, dug out the sandwich he hadn't touched during shift, and set it on the sidewalk a few feet from the bench. No reaction, not even a sniff. So Jack got in his truck, turned the engine, and left, but not before making the one mistake that would change everything. He looked back. In the rearview mirror, beneath the gray sky and rusted shelter, he saw something he would never unsee. Tears. They weren't dramatic, weren't loud, just thin streams sliding down the dog's muzzle, too slow to be rain, like the storm had started from the inside. That night, Jack tossed and turned. His apartment felt colder than usual, too quiet. That dog stare was lodged behind his eyes, like an itch under his ribs. He told himself he'd check again in the morning, just to make sure the dog was okay, but deep down, he already knew. This wasn't going to be a one-time thing. This was the start of something else. The next morning, he didn't even shower, threw on yesterday's hoodie, grabbed a half-eaten bag of jerky, and headed out. And there he was, same spot, same position, same stare. Jack stepped out, held the bag loosely, and spoke as if greeting an old friend. "Figured you might still be here." He dropped the jerky nearby. No closer than yesterday. The dog didn't blink. His fur, still damp from the previous night's rain, clung to him like it belonged to a different season. Jack sat on the opposite bench, just watching. "You're not hungry," he murmured. "You're waiting." The realization wasn't new, but it hit different now, more certain, more sorrowful. The dog wasn't staying out of confusion. He wasn't lost. He was waiting for someone specific, and that kind of waiting, Jack knew, wasn't about logic. It was about love. Every time a car passed, the shepherd perked up, ears twitching, gaze sharpening, then sagged back down like a balloon losing air, not just staring, hoping, the kind of hope that hurt more than it helped. After 2 hours, Jack wandered into the nearby gas station. The clerk behind the counter had the look of a man who had stopped being surprised by much of anything. "German Shepherd out front," Jack said. "You seen him before?" The man squinted through the rain-streaked window. "Shows up every day. Early, stays till dark, won't let nobody near. Been here long? Week, maybe more. Waiting for someone?" The man shrugged. "Aren't we all?" Back outside, Jack noticed something he hadn't before. Deep grooves in the concrete near the bus bench. Repetitive, rhythmic, like the desperate clawing of a dog pacing the same loop for hours on end. The stop had been closed for over a year. No routes, no schedules, just rusted metal and memory. Still, the dog stayed. That night, Jack didn't go home. He parked across the street, killed the engine, and waited. Watching. The rain returned with steady insistence. The dog didn't move, even as puddles gathered around him. Just after midnight, a blue pickup truck rattled down the road. Old model, faded paint, same kind Jack had driven 10 years ago. And for the first time, the dog stood, not casually, like he'd been summoned. His ears snapped forward, eyes followed the truck until it disappeared behind the trees. Then he sat back down. That was it. Jack's breath caught. That wasn't instinct, that was memory. Someone drove that truck once, someone who mattered, someone who said they'd be back, and, never came. But the dog, he never stopped waiting. And now Jack wasn't sure if he could either. Jack returned the next day with more than jerky and a heavier sense of purpose. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he knew what he couldn't do. Nothing. The German Shepherd was still there. Same position, same unwavering stare toward the curve in the road, as if any second now the person he loved most in the world would round that bend and everything would make sense again. Jack parked across the street and didn't approach this time. Instead, he watched from the cab of his truck. Let the engine idle, let the windshield fog. It was easier to observe without interfering, to try and understand something so wordless and raw. Every 10 minutes or so, a car would pass. Each time, the shepherd would stir, ears lifting, spine straightening, body tense with a hope that never paid off. And each time he would sag again, like the very bones inside him deflated. Jack felt it deeper than he cared to admit. He knew that kind of disappointment. The kind you rehearse for, but it still crushes you every time. Around midday, Jack made another visit to the gas station. He asked about flyers. The clerk gestured to the wall by the restroom and handed him a pushpin. "Plenty of dogs get dumped," the man said. "But this one, he's different. Acts like he knows who he's waiting for." Jack just nodded. He didn't bother explaining what he already believed. This dog wasn't wandering. He was anchored. Back at the bus stop, Jack noticed new details. The way the dog's paws were worn flat, pink, and tender from pacing. The way he hadn't even tried to scavenge. No turned-over trash bins, no signs of digging. He was too focused on the road, too busy waiting to worry about survival. Jack sat on the bench across from him, sandwich in hand. He didn't offer it, just ate in silence. "You're not hungry," he murmured. "You're just loyal." The dog didn't blink, but Jack had seen enough body language in his life to know when an animal is listening. That night, Jack drove home but couldn't bring himself to go inside. He sat in the truck with the heat on low and the radio off, thinking, the dog, he needed help. Not just food or shelter. He needed to be understood. So the next morning, Jack printed flyers. Found dog, German Shepherd, male, no collar, seen daily at Greyhound bus stop. He tacked them to poles and pinned one to the bulletin board. At the coffee shop near the train tracks, it felt like tossing a bottle into the ocean, but it was something. Then something happened. His phone buzzed. A woman's voice on the line. Hesitant, uncertain. "I saw your flyer. I don't know if it's the same dog, but my old neighbor had a shepherd. Really loyal. Always followed him around. Then one day the guy just moved out, left the dog behind. That was maybe 3 weeks ago." Jack's grip tightened. "Do you know his name?" "Ron Denton." The name hit like a hammer to the ribs. Jack scribbled it down. "Where did he live?" "Corner of Reed Market and Holman. Beige house, red shutters." Jack was in the truck. Within minutes, the house was easy to find. It looked like no one had been there in months. Weeds strangled the porch railings. The mailbox overflowed with unopened letters. Jack stepped up and opened it. One envelope caught his eye. R. Denton on the return label. The backyard was worse. A plastic crate lay half buried in weeds. One side had been chewed through. Inside, claw marks etched the plastic. Jack crouched beside it. This wasn't a kennel, this was confinement. He drove straight to the bus stop. The shepherd was still there, still staring. But when Jack sat this time, something shifted. The dog turned his head just slightly, not a full turn, not trust. But something cracked. Jack felt it, a fracture in the silence. He stayed until sunset. When he got home, he called Bend Animal Clinic. Dr. Emily Grant answered. "I've got a shepherd," Jack said. "He's not mine, but I think he needs help. Bring him in," she said without hesitation. Jack tried everything to coax the dog into the truck. Treats, soft words, sitting beside the open door. But the dog flinched at sudden movement. Jack saw it then. This wasn't fear of people. It was fear of history. This dog had been broken in a way that doesn't heal with food. That night, the rain returned. Jack found him curled behind the bench, soaked and shaking. His body folded in on itself like he was trying to disappear. Jack didn't ask permission. He grabbed the wool blanket from his truck, wrapped the dog, and lifted him. He was light, too light, and he didn't resist, didn't move, didn't flinch. At the clinic, Dr. Grant moved with quiet urgency. Fluids, warmth, soft voices. "He's dehydrated," she said. "Starving. Older. 8 or 9 maybe, and..." She paused, tracing a finger along a scar on his hind leg. "He's been restrained. Probably..." For years, Jack didn't speak. He couldn't. Later that night in the recovery room, the shepherd opened his eyes. For the first time, he looked at Jack, not past him. And that gaze, it wasn't trust. Not yet. The next morning, Jack arrived at the clinic just as the sun broke over the ridge. He hadn't slept, not really. His mind kept circling, around the dog, around the name Ron Denton, around that crate chewed through by desperation, around the way Shadow, he had started thinking of the dog as Shadow, had looked at him for the first time not with fear, but with the slow, aching weight of recognition. Dr. Grant met him at the back door. Her eyes were tired but kind. "He made it through the night," she said quietly. "Vitals are stable. He even ate a little." Jack exhaled, the breath longer than he meant it to be. "He's got a long way to go," she added. But he didn't give up. That's saying something. Jack stepped into the recovery room, moving slow. Shadow lay curled on a blanket, IV taped to his leg, fur still dull but less hollow. His eyes opened when Jack entered. No movement, just acknowledgement. Jack crouched beside him, not touching, just being there. "You remember, don't you?" he whispered. "You remember everything." Shadow blinked once. A slow, solemn gesture. Jack thought about the house, the mailbox overflowing, the scars inside that crate, the absence of life in a place meant for it. He thought about that woman's voice on the phone. He left one day and never came back. But Jack knew better. People don't just vanish without noise. Later that day, Jack drove back to the bus stop, not with Shadow, but with a question. Something about that place still itched at the back of his skull. He parked where he always did, crossed the street, and stepped into the weeds behind the shelter. That's when he saw it. At first it looked like a patch of dark earth. Then he stepped closer. The shape was irregular, blackened at the edges, faintly scorched. Jack crouched, brushed away a layer of debris. Ash lifted into the morning air. He found something caught in the edge of the burned patch. 2 short strands of fur, singed, coarse, familiar, shadows. Jack stood up slowly, heart kicking against his ribs. This wasn't just abandonment. Something had happened here, something final. Back at the clinic, he didn't say much, just sat with Shadow, one hand resting near, not on his paw. Dr. Grant joined him with 2 cups of tea. "You think someone did this?" she asked gently. Jack nodded. "I think he saw it, whatever it was." She sighed, set her tea down. "We could file a report. Not much to go on, but it's a start." Jack looked down at Shadow, who had shifted just enough to rest his chin, near Jack's boot. "Yeah," he said, "let's start." The sheriff's office was quiet. Jack kept it simple. Explained the dog, the location, the name on the mail, the burned patch, the crate, the scars. The deputy took notes, raised his eyebrows a few times, nodded politely. Promised to run it up the chain. Jack wasn't holding his breath. But later that evening, something shifted in Shadow. Back at Jack's home, the dog walked, slowly, carefully, from the front door to the rug near the fireplace. He didn't curl at the door like before. He didn't pace. He lay down. That night, for the first time, he slept deeply. No flinching, no sudden waking, just sleep. But in the morning, he was back at the window, eyes trained on the road. And Jack understood. Truth helps, but it doesn't heal overnight. Still, it was a start. He bought a better bed, placed it near the fire. Started walking Shadow for short stretches. Every step was slow, cautious, but purposeful. Each day, Shadow walked a little farther. Each night, he slept a little deeper. Jack tried to avoid the news, but it found him anyway. One headline, a small mention. Sheriff's Department reopens cold. Case linked to missing local man, Ron Denton. And just like that, people started talking. Neighbors remembered things. A blue pickup parked on the street too long. Shouts behind closed doors. A shadow moving through the backyard at night. No one had said anything before. But now, with Shadow's story out, the silence was breaking. Jack received a visit from a reporter. Young, overly eager. He declined the interview. Shadow didn't need a spotlight. He needed peace. But peace doesn't come easy when the past keeps knocking. It came one night in the form of a black SUV. It moved slow past Jack's house, engine low, windows too dark. Shadow stood the moment it approached, body tense, ears forward. Not fear, recognition. It passed without stopping. But Jack knew. Someone else remembered too. Later, a neighbor mentioned seeing that same SUV near Reed Market the week Ron disappeared. And now Jack's questions weren't just about a dog. They were about a cover-up. He started documenting everything, photos, dates, routes, every strange car, every noise, every shift in Shadow's body language. The sheriff called again. "We might need to bring him in," the voice said. "If he witnessed something, if there's a case," Jack interrupted, calm but firm. "He's not your evidence." There was a pause. "Of course not. We'll keep you updated." Shadow watched from the window, always the road, always the silence. But now the silence wasn't hopeless. It was waiting for something real. The first sign wasn't a sound. It was a stillness. Not the kind that signaled peace, but the kind that warned of a shift in the air, like the moments before a storm breaks. Jack and Shadow had just rounded the trail bend near the Deschutes River, one of the few places Shadow walked with ease now. Trees whispered above them, spring just beginning to stretch into the valley. Then Shadow stopped. Every muscle in his body froze. His ears shot forward. His gaze locked onto the thicket ahead. Jack knew that stance, not fear tracking Shadow, he said softly. "What is it?" The dog didn't move. Then suddenly he bolted. Jack cursed, heart racing, and followed, branches whipping his face, underbrush clawing at his legs. Shadow moved not like a dog running, but like a soldier returning to the site of something lost. They reached a clearing hidden deep in the pines. Shadow began to dig. Jack dropped to his knees beside him. The first thing he uncovered was fabric, torn, weather-worn. Then came a cracked phone, screen-spidered, battery corroded. And then, a duffel bag. Inside, damp clothes, a blood-stained leash, and at the bottom, a uniform patch. Denton. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He took photos. Called the sheriff. Then he waited. The forensics team arrived an hour later, cordoned off the area, collected everything. Jack stayed with Shadow beneath a tree. The shepherd didn't pace, didn't flinch. He simply lay down and watched. He had brought Jack here, not with a bark, not with a growl, but with memory. He had never forgotten. Later that week, the sheriff confirmed it. The blood matched Ron Denton's. The area was now an official crime scene. They hadn't found a body, but they had found enough. The local news picked it up fast. Dog leads Guardian. To clues in missing man case. Some called Shadow a hero. Jack hated the word. Shadow hadn't tried to be anything, he had just remembered. Jack watched him closely after that. Expected him to fall apart again. But something strange happened. Shadow didn't return to the window. He stayed near Jack. Near the fire, near the warmth. Something in him had shifted, not healed, but unburdened. One evening, while walking through town, a child dropped their backpack near Shadow. The boy froze. Shadow walked over slowly, nudged the bag back toward him, then sat calmly. No bark, no tension, just presence. Dr. Grant saw it too. "You've got yourself a therapy dog," she said, smiling. Jack shook his head. "No," he said. "I've got something better." Still, questions lingered. Why had Ron vanished? Who had burned the patch behind the bus stop? And why had Shadow survived? Then came the black SUV again. Slower this time, more deliberate. Shadow stood by the porch railing, body coiled. Jack stepped beside him. The SUV rolled past, turned at the stop sign, and disappeared. The next morning, Jack installed cameras. Later, the sheriff called again. "We have new leads. Someone used Denton's credit card after the disappearance. Not a stranger, someone local." Jack nodded silently. He already knew. Shadow had outlived the man who wronged them both. But the real justice? That would take time. What mattered more now was something simpler. Shadow had stopped waiting. One night, Jack drove him back to the bus stop, just once. For closure, Shadow stood beside him, eyes calm, body steady. He didn't stare at the road. He looked ahead. When they turned to leave, he didn't look back. Jack exhaled. It was over, or at least enough of it was. Back home, the fire crackled. Shadow lay beside it, eyes half closed. Jack sat with his journal, pen hovering. He didn't write about Denton, or the crime, or the headlines. He wrote one word: trust. Because that's what it had been about all along. Not solving something, but restoring something. And as the snow began to fall outside, quiet, clean, slow, Shadow stirred in his sleep. No more flinching, no more pacing. Only breath, only rest. Spring came slow to Bend, Oregon, the kind of spring that didn't announce itself with flowers or warmth, but with quiet shifts, a longer pause of sunlight in the afternoon, the soft drip of melting snow, the absence of wind for just a moment. Jack noticed it most in Shadow, the way he moved through the house without caution now, without scanning each corner for ghosts, the way he'd nap in the sunlight on the porch instead of curling up in shadows, the way he breathed. He no longer watched the road. He no longer waited. But he remembered. And so did Jack. Some mornings they walked the old trail, not because they were searching, but because walking together had become their rhythm. Other days, Shadow followed Jack to the coffee shop or the hardware store, lying beside the truck with calm eyes and a steady chest. The town knew him now, not just as the dog from the headlines, but as something more enduring. A presence, a reminder, not of violence or tragedy, but of something stronger, survival without bitterness, memory without fear. Neighbors left treats at the gate, kids waved, strangers asked to pet him, and Shadow let them, most of the time. Jack watched it all with the quiet pride of someone who hadn't just rescued a dog, but had been rescued in return. One evening, they sat together on the front steps as the sky turned from gold to navy. A breeze carried the scent of pine, and the stars blinked into being like they were shy. Shadow rested his head against Jack's knee. Jack didn't speak. He didn't have to. Because some endings don't need to be declared. Some endings are felt, in the way a dog finally sleeps with. Both eyes closed. In the way silence settles without weight. The sheriff's office never called again. Justice was still unraveling, probably always would be. But for Shadow, that part was over. What remained was something gentler, belonging. Jack thought of putting up a sign once, Shadow's place, but it felt too loud for the kind of quiet they had built. Instead, he planted wildflowers along the path leading to the porch. Let the world bloom in its own time. One morning, a new dog appeared at the edge of the fence, thin, uncertain, too scared to bark. Shadow saw him first. He didn't run, didn't posture, just walked toward the fence and sat. Jack watched from the porch. Another one? He murmured, half to himself. Shadow didn't turn, just stayed. And in that stillness, Jack understood. This wasn't just a home anymore. It was a refuge. Place not for waiting, but for beginning again, and they were ready for whoever came next.